It's possible that Ohio State will have 5 players drafted tonight in the first round. And if it happens, it says everything about the talent Ohio State recruits and that their development is working.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Jay Stevens. During today's show, we will look at the 2026 NFL Draft, which is tonight. We've been waiting all year for this moment to hear a lot of Buckeye players' names drafted and called. And here to break down not just the top end of the draft, but the entire Ohio State draft class is my guy, Ryan Roberts from A to Z Sports. Ryan and I have been doing draft stuff on this show and a previous podcast I hosted for, 5 years now, maybe 6. I forget the exact number of times, but this year is a little bit different, and Ryan and I are going to just kind of break down everything from beginning to end in a couple of shows on draft day. Ryan lives for this moment. He loves the draft, and I think a lot of Ohio State fans, Ryan, would love to hear 5 Buckeye names called in the first round.
And I'm sure they will, right? I mean, that is the summation of a healthy program, obviously. I know Ryan Day caught some slack with a recent tidbit that came out about him saying, like, everybody needs to be a first or second round draft pick that we bring. And I know that some people looked at that and been like, you last 2 quarterbacks you won a national championship with were not first round quarterbacks. So I understand why it had some pushback, but ultimately I do think that is him saying that, like, hey man, we need to recruit at a level where we're recruiting some high level guys. And ultimately the best indicator of drafting high level guys is knowing that eventually those guys become very early draft picks. So this Ohio State team, I think we're going to look back on it, and not to open up wounds on an Ohio State channel, Joe. Joe, my God, wow. I record too much with Joe.
It's like a smack in the face.
I know, dude. I know. You look nothing alike in a lot of ways.
This is true.
We're going to look back at the 2025 Ohio State team. We're going to say, how did that team not win a national championship? Because you're going to be like, they had 2 first-round wide receivers, and they had multiple offensive linemen that were probably going to play in the NFL, and you had a quarterback who was in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, and you had defenders left and right going in the first round. How did that team not win a national championship? But yes, very talented team, though, for sure, without question.
One of my goals was to not bring up that fact that this team was so talented, or last year's team was so talented, that they should have been not just the easy favorite, but they should have beaten everybody on their schedule to win the Natty. It didn't happen. Ryan brought it up, or don't have the time to dive into it. That may be an all-season topic where I bring Ryan in and just kind of look back on the 2025 season and how odd it was for Ohio State. But the 5 guys that we're talking about are Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, Carnell Tate, Caleb Downs, and Kayden McDonald. The top 4 in that group could easily be 4 top 10 picks, which is a little insane to think about 4 guys from one team being top 10 picks. But Ryan, I asked you before the show, you think it's possible. Why do you think it's possible that 4 Buckeyes are drafted in the top 10?
So first and foremost, you know how nice of a friend I am, Jay, to make up for me calling you my co-host Joe's name for a second there, was I actually did look it up. In 2004, Miami Hurricanes had 6, and the Alabama Crimson Tide in 2021 NFL Draft had 6 as well. So 6 is the number in terms of most first-round draft picks. When it comes to those 4 that could go top 10, I look at it and say Arvell Reese is a lock to go inside of the top 3 picks at this point, if not top 4 at very worst, but I do think he'll be off the board in top 3. Teams are actively seeking, including the Dallas Cowboys, to potentially trade up for Sonny Styles, so he is going to go in the top 10. Carnell Tate, while there's been some back and forth and disagreement on him throughout this draft process after he ran his 4.53 or whatever it was at the combine, he is the safest bet of any wide receiver in this class, least amount of holes, and I think that he is going to go in the top 10. And Caleb Downs, by a lot of teams, is like a top 2 to 3 player on their board. So although safeties don't typically go in the top 10, the Cincinnati Bengals pick at number 10, and I would be pretty shocked if a team from Ohio chose to look past a guy like Caleb Downs when you have so many needs on the defensive side of the football. So I just think that when you're talking about like the betting odds, I think 3 or 4 are like locks to be in the top 10, but I do think that 4 ultimately all do go inside the top 10 selections.
Here's some more trivia for you, Ryan, and I don't think you'll know this, but we'll have fun anyway. Do you know the last time, or if there's been a time where a team had 4 players taken in the top 10 of one draft?
I mean, my guess would maybe be the Miami Hurricanes in 2004. Okay. I would have to go back and look, but like they probably didn't even, because I'm trying to think of like that group was probably like Vince Wilfork and Philip Buchanan and those guys. And I don't think all those guys went inside the top 10. So
Right.
the answer might be never. Is the answer never? I feel like it might be that's probably never happens.
That's wild. That's wild to think about. And I mean, it does go to show the type of players that Ryan Day brings in, but also the development that is going on in Columbus. And you can discuss and break down all the things that went wrong. And Ryan Day talked about how the 19 loss to Clemson and the loss to Georgia in the 2021 season, how those things still haunt him. One thing that shouldn't haunt him and he should just kind of lean into is what's been building in Columbus, which is a process that works. Recruit elite talent, maybe get guys out of the portal that are top-end talent, but then develop them once they're on campus, and you'll see them raise their own draft stock. And so you can say whatever you want about Ryan Day, like him or, hey, it doesn't really matter. You can lean into, as Ohio State fans and even players, that what Ryan Day is doing right now, it works, and you will make a lot of money when you get into the NFL.
Well, I mean, a great example is of the 5 potential first-rounders that we're talking about, 4 of them were recruited and developed from high school to end of his career, right? Outside of Caleb Downs spending 1 year at Alabama, all those guys are high school recruits that came to Ohio State. So if you want an indicator of development, like, yes, Ohio State has attacked the portal at times over the last couple of years with like Quinshon Judkins and Caleb Downs and a couple other guys, Josh Simmons a couple years ago to San Diego State. But like for the most part, they have recruited, retained, and developed their top talents. And it is obviously showing off with those 4 out of 5 guys being from the high school ranks.
Why will Kaden McDonald be drafted outside of the top 10?
It's the pass rush upside. I mean, so like Kaden McDonald is one of my favorite players in the class. And I think generally I'm higher on him than a lot of people in the media space, because I do think that we hyper focus on one aspect of the game a little. Like when we break down a player and we become like super critical of them, we always hyper focus on the negative, because that's just kind of the society we live in. We like to live in the negative for whatever reason. And yes, Kaden McDonald does not have as much pass rush upside as a Caleb Banks if he's fully healthy, a Peter Woods if he's locked in. Like his upside is not as good on obvious pass situations. But I just don't care, because his run game stuff is just so dominant. I mean, he's like one of the best run defending defensive tackles I've ever seen. And we could have the conversation of like value of a run stopper versus a interior pass rusher and an all-around player, and have the conversation of like percentage of snaps that Kayden McDonald's going to play on the NFL level. All I know is with a defense that had Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles running scot-free, when you're talking about Caden Curry, who's a very marginal talent, was able to do what he did this year, it's because number 98 in the interior was taking up so much attention. Because you trust me when I tell you this, opposing offensive linemen know who Kaden McDonald is. Some people might underrate him, but they did not underrate the value that he gets to be able to open up things and make guys around him better. And ultimately, I am always going to value players that make everybody around them better. And Kaden McDonald's a first rounder to me. If he gets out of the first round, then he's a steal for any team picking early in second. But I just think that his run game impact is so high that I find it hard to believe that at least a playoff team in the back end of the first round isn't going to go like, hey, that guy, although quote unquote a luxury of sorts, that guy's a winning football player. We need more guys that are winning football players on our roster.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open when the pressure is on, and you need the right hire. This is a job for Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. Skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to go through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen of the day, and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Get Locked On Buckeyes ad-free with the Everydayer Club, plus members-only Discord access, and a whole lot more. You and your boys can join the fun at lockedonbuckeyes.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. In your eyes, who are some teams I might pick him late in the first round?
Chicago at 25 is an interesting one. I've seen some pushback on that because they kind of want a little bit more of like a penetration style 3 technique, and McDonald obviously doesn't fit that. But I think that when you add a player like that, it just opens up your ability to be impactful in the interior. Chicago's at 25. The Los Angeles Chargers are at 22. The Houston Texans are at 28. I think all those teams make a whole lot of sense. I could even see like a Kansas City Chiefs, I think, pick 29. Like putting him next to Chris Jones would be incredibly impactful if he got there. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I would even say like New England Patriots, it might not be the biggest need on the roster, but depending how the board falls, like again, adding in Kaden McDonald to pick 31 is not a bad spot. So there's a lot of people between like 22 and 31 that I think make a lot of sense for a guy like Kaden McDonald.
Where do you fall in the conversation about Arvell Reese playing on the edge or being an off-ball linebacker?
I mean, it's facts versus opinions. My opinion is that I still think he's a better linebacker than he is an edge rusher on the NFL level. But the facts is that someone's probably going to draft him to at least transition to being a full-time edge eventually. I think the best scenario for him, though, for me, is year one, you're going to give him reps on the edge in certain situations. But I want to play him at inside linebacker to start because I think that the biggest thing I disagree with for people out there is a lot of people are calling Arvell Reese a boomer bust prospect. I agree that he's a boomer bust player in terms of if you just think he's a pass rusher.
Correct.
Because like you don't have a sample size to say for sure that he's going to be like this all-pro pass rusher. But he is not a boomer bust player as a linebacker. In anything, he's a very high floor linebacker because he's physical, he's downhill, he's got good eyes, good processor. He's going to be a heck of an inside linebacker. But when you draft a kid inside the top 3 that has edge potential, I understand why some teams will view him and say he, by year 2 at least, year 3, is going to be almost an exclusive edge. I personally think that he's LeVar Arrington. I think I said this on the show last time I was on. Like, I think that he is a dominant second-level defender that also can play on the edge in obvious passing situations. That's Arvell Reese to me. If you view him as just one compared to the other, I think you're doing him a disservice because there's a very clear line between being versatile and being a tweener. Some people will say Arvell Reese is a tweener. I completely disagree. He's versatile. He can do almost any. I mean, I've seen him at Mike. I've seen him playing from pursuit. I've seen him play Sam. I've seen him play on the line of scrimmage. This kid is a great football player. The most hilarious thing I saw, Jay, was someone, and I forget who it was actually, and I'm actually going to clown on them for a second, but somebody posted a video of Arvell Reese's performance against Indiana. And they were like, oh, I just can't buy into a guy that had 1 assisted tackle. But like he showed all of his quote-unquote plays from that game. And I'm just like, if you watch this and don't understand the impact that Arvell Reese has on every single snap that go well beyond the box score, he was unblockable in that game. It's just, hey, that number 8's effing good, and as an offensive coordinator, I'm not going to test number 8s after the first few games of the season that I saw. So I think people severely underrate how consistently good he is playing on the second level, and I'm all the way bought in. I'm glad that I'm not alone in this. I still have him as my number 1 player in the class. I know Dane Brugler from The Athletic does as well. Look, man, if he gets drafted to the right situation, I think he's an all-pro. It just comes down to that.
Let's do some player comps real quick, Ryan, before we get out of the guys that will be the first 5 Buckeyes taken. You've already given a player comp for, I think, Arvell Reese. You mentioned that one a little bit. Can you give player comps for Sonny Styles, Carnell Tate, Downs, and McDonald?
So for Carnell Tate, I have kind of settled on a Reggie Wayne comp for him because I think that look, there's going to be an interesting debate of like, is he better as like a high end number 2 in comparison to a number 1 receiver on the NFL level? I think he's the number 1 guy. Like, I think he can be that guy. Look, man, my people always throw that shade too. They're like, man, he never was the number 1 receiver at Ohio State. It's like, yeah, how many of these guys play with Jeremiah Smith, guys? Like, what are we doing here? Yes, he was the number 1 receiver on a team that had the best receiver prospect we probably have seen since Julio Jones. I'm sorry that he failed to make that ascension, right? I think, though, in Reggie Wayne's case, Reggie was so deceptive with everything he did when he was with the Colts. Like, ran great routes, had shockingly good length comparative to his position. Maybe he wasn't a burner, but like he was a consistent separator. And that's what I see with Carnell. Carnell's got a great catch radius. He's got really strong hands. He's a very nuanced player. I think he's Reggie Wayne. Like, Reggie Wayne makes a lot of sense to me personally. When you're talking about a Kaden McDonald, I think he's a plus version of Jonathan Hankins is kind of how I viewed him. Hankins was a valuable interior defensive lineman for a long, long time, but I do think he has more upside than what Hankins even brought to the table as a player. So I think a plus version of him would be an interesting one. Styles is interesting because like we just have never seen anybody like Styles before. Like it's so weird, dude. It's like 6'5", 245, run 4.46. It's just like I just don't know what to make of him. I think some people will visually just be like, hey, Tremaine Edmonds, because like body type they're similar. But I think he's a much more like smooth athlete than Tremaine is. Tremaine's more like explosive. While Sonny's explosive too, I think Sonny's just like incredibly smooth, which makes sense for your safety. So I actually don't have a great comp for him. Caleb Downs is Budda Baker to me. Like that's who I think Caleb Downs is. Undersized technically for like a guy that's going to spend a lot of time in the box, but he has such a feel for space and he's so consistent and he's physical and he fits and he has energy about him. And I was talking with Joe about this the other day, Jay, and I didn't realize this. When I made the Budda Baker comp, some people think that it's a negative, but when you look at Budda Baker's career, it's like that guy's made 8 Pro Bowls and been all pro 3 times. It's like Budda Baker's been one of the most underrated players in this era. Like he's such a good player. So that's what I see in Caleb Downs. So I don't think that necessarily he's like this dynamic, exciting athlete, but from a physical perspective, from an accountability perspective, from a leadership perspective, he has all the intangibles to be a big time player in the NFL.
I heard someone recently talk about Caleb Downs, and it's kind of where I sit because a lot of my football fandom, you mentioned Reggie Wayne, I'm a Colts fan. I don't really watch the NFL like I did when I was a kid, and so I don't know all the players and how good they are. I know who the elite names, but I can't break it down like I used to. I always go back to Caleb Downs and Troy Polamalu, but there's always been a distinction between what Downs does great and what Polamalu did for a long period of time. What kind of separates, why is Polamalu not the comp for Caleb Downs?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think Polamalu was such a risk taker, right?
He was.
Like he made a lot of ballsy decisions, for lack of a better word. And I actually don't see that in Caleb Downs. Like I think Caleb Downs is not like passive like at all, but I think he's a really good decision maker. Like Caleb's one of those guys that's just always in the right spot at all times. I don't think you could say that about Troy Polamalu. Like he was not always in the right place, the right spot, but when he was there, he made big plays, like jumping over the pile and forcing fumbles and making big hits. Like Polamalu was instinctual, but he was proactive to a fault at times. I more see like Budda Baker and Caleb Downs because I think that although he's aggressive and physical, I do think he's one of those guys that is quietly just like in the right spot all the time. So I think controlled chaos is the best way to describe a player like Downs.
Next up on our list is a guy that Ryan already mentioned earlier. I'm going to jump up a little bit to move Caden Curry up in my notebook because Caden Curry is a guy I had the privilege of watching him quite a bit in high school, and then he came to Ohio State, and I was very happy to see another guy that I watched in high school play in Columbus. He had to wait his turn. He had to wait because he was behind Sawyer and Tuimoloau, and then once they're gone, he ended up being a force last year for the Buckeyes defense. He led the team in sacks. But as you mentioned earlier, his talent is good at the college level. I don't know where he falls when it comes to the NFL. If I'm using my very small knowledge of draft projection in my mind, the high game would be a late round 3 draft pick. The best scenario where I think he's probably going to go is probably middle of the 4th round. I could see 5th round would be like the latest in the draft. I don't see him being a 6th or 7th round pick. The 3rd round would be, does someone really love him enough to take a guy like that who you're trying to figure out where the best spot is in the NFL? I don't know where if I sound crazy, Ryan, I'm not a draft guy like you, but when you watch Caden Curry, what do you see?
Yeah, I don't think you're far off. I think it was Dane Brugler again from The Athletic who had said that like a lot of the feedback he was hearing from the NFL was like the 4th to 5th round. So like, yeah, I think that that's probably somewhere where Caden Curry will go. I am admittedly, and I know I've been like rays of sunshine on this podcast so far. Like I'm admittedly like much lower on Caden Curry just because like I think that he is the perfect example of a really good college football player that I'm not sure his traits translate that well to the NFL because we haven't spent much time talking about Caden because, you know, again, he's a day 3 player more than likely, but he's a historical outlier for the arm length conversation for a second. Dude, he had like 30 and an 1/8 inch arms or something like that. Like
that seems very short.
That is, according to Mock Draftable, that is tied for the shortest arm since 1999 for an edge rusher. So yes, that is very, very short. We've been hyper focusing on Ruben Bain having 30 and 7/8, but there's 2 guys in this class, Cassius Howell and Caden Curry, that actually have the shortest arm since 1999 that we haven't spent a ton of time talking about because Cassius Howell's like a borderline first round pick and Caden Curry's a day 3 player and he doesn't bring the same headlines that a Ruben Bain does, obviously, right? So I think, though, I wouldn't necessarily bet against Caden Curry making a roster on the NFL level because I've heard nothing but rave reviews about him from a working perspective. I mean, he's one of those guys that he could have went in the portal early in his career and he probably could have gotten an opportunity to play a lot earlier than his 2025 breakout. But he is a program guy, a really hard worker, plays great in terms of like his motor and his IDing in the run game. Like he does a lot of good things that will make him a potential to stick. I just don't see great athlete and I don't see length. I don't see ability to play outside of your frame. So I think that he is firmly a day 3 player that maybe can make it, but I just don't see much of a ceiling when it comes to Caden Curry.
Where do you see, what is Davison Igbinosun's ceiling in the NFL?
Oh man, so Davison is a guy that I've had a very roller coaster of a career evaluating.
I think a lot of Ohio State fans have had a roller coaster watching him play too.
Dude, 2024 was just not good. Like I don't know how else to explain it. Like so many pass interference, so many holding penalties. Like I mean, the guy was a walking flag last year, right? So or 2 years ago, excuse me. This year, he did a much better job being consistent at the catch point and not being as grabby. So like he showed a lot of improvement. And I don't think he didn't test as well as I thought he was going to, but like when I watch him, I think he's a very athletic kid. Like I think he's explosive. I think he can run. So height, weight, speed perspective, I think that a lot of teams like Davison Igbinosun, which is why I think he ultimately will go in the top 64 picks. He's probably somewhere in the second round, mid-second round conversation. I don't think I'm quite there with him. Again, like he's grown on me a lot. I like him a lot better than I do a year prior. But I do think against more consistent NFL receivers from a week in to week out perspective, I do think some of that holding and penalty stuff could come back a little bit as you panic against NFL talent. But I think he's going to get drafted to be a cornerback 2 in the NFL. I don't see him ever being a cornerback 1. But I think the ceiling is as a solid starting cornerback 2. But unfortunately, I do think the floor is maybe a little bit lower for Igbinosun.
So it sounds like you're thinking he's probably a day 3 pick.
I would draft him in the 3rd to 4th round, but I think he's going to go in the top 64. Like I think that somewhere in the second round he might come off the board. Yeah, if not third round, like he won't get out of the top 75 in my opinion. I don't think he'll get out of the top 75.
That's insane based off the things you just said about him as a player. And I honestly genuinely value your opinion and your analysis of guys. I jokingly say, like, you're my favorite NFL draft analyst. That's a joke kind of is actually real because I do value your opinion and what your eyeballs see, how you analyze the football. But I part of me thought that the stuff from 2024 would still plague him right now, but it sounds like it probably won't.
Most recent film is always what matters most. Okay. So NFL teams are willing to forgive past film. And so their 2025 film is all that matters to teams right now. And the 2025 film, again, was much cleaner than 2024. I still think he has his flaws. I don't think he's consistent. And the one thing that actually hurt him again is he didn't test quite as well as some people thought. They thought he was a little bit of a freak. I think he plays faster than when he did testing wise. So I still think he'll go pretty early because I know before the season, even before the season, Jay, as poor as the 2024 film was, in my opinion, teams still had 3rd round grades on Davison Igbinosun. So I think second round is not out of the question at all. I think that starting at like pick 50, I would be on Davison Igbinosun watch.
Is around pick 50 where you'll be on Max Clare watch?
Oh, man. I'm so conflicted with Max Clare. I still like Max Clare a lot. He's still my tight end 2 in this class because I think that after Kenyon Sadiq, there's like a interesting debate of like Oscar Delp from Georgia and Eli Stowers from Vanderbilt and Max Clare from Ohio State. There's a very interesting debate. I was a little bit, I don't want to say underwhelmed, but like I was expecting a little bit more from a pass game perspective for Max Clare. I know we talked about it a lot in the past. Like Ohio State has not always just prioritized tight end play. I mean, outside of Cade Stover that one year, they don't really prioritize the position. But he still had quietly like over 400 yards despite sharing the football with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. And obviously Ohio State traditionally runs the football at a decent clip. So I think that there are still a lot of positives there. I think the one big thing that actually did help him this year is he put on some good weight when he was in Columbus, and I think he became a better blocker than he was at Purdue. At Purdue, I comped him to Zach Ertz because I was like, that guy is a really good route runner, smooth as hell, won't block a soul, like just doesn't block, right? Like that was what I saw with Clare. Clare was a lot more willing this year. Like he's not Will Kazmarek, right? Like Will Kazmarek's a dog in the run game, but I think Clare is now passable. So I still think he'll go in on day 2 for sure, in my opinion, but there's a possibility he gets out of round 2 just because he didn't quite take the ascension that I was hoping for that he would. But I still think he's a good all-around player that still has upside as a pass catcher.
It's weird because you talk about the film conversation earlier, and that was going to be my initial transition from one player to the next as far as your 2025 film being what people really lean into. 2024 film, he was an all Big Ten tight end. I think he had 51 receptions. And I'm thinking, okay, like Ohio State's getting a guy that can change the mindset about how people view Ohio State tight ends. He gets to Columbus, and they're like, no, you're going to do what we have to do. And you were leaning into blocking. And I'm like, maybe you're not utilizing a weapon you should use because you're so stuck in your ways. And I still think it's going to happen this year with Arthur Smith being the OC at Ohio State. I still view them as a team that's going to be stuck in their ways of the tight ends and making sure they are really good blockers, occasionally used in the passing game. You mentioned the Cade Stover year. I thought Jeremy Ruckert was going to be the guy to change the mold of Ohio State tight ends and kind of be that breakout guy, break all the records, the touchdown receptions for in a single year for Ohio State tight ends. Never happened. I think part of that was also him, not so much the reluctancy of the coaches. But Max Clare's film in 2024 to 2025, there is a difference between really good pass catcher to a guy who's really good at getting better at blocking, but they didn't use his receiving ability as I thought they should. And I wonder how NFL teams view that.
Well, I think NFL teams will always consider context to things. It's similar to the conversation I talked about with, why was Carnell Tate never a 1,000-yard receiver at Ohio State? Why was he never the number one receiver? And it's like he played with Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. I mean, like I don't know what to tell you. Like he's in a loaded room, obviously. And before he got banged up this year, Carnell Tate was playing at an amazing level. Like he was consistent week in and week out, making a big play or two a game. When I look at Max Clare, I think of it similarly, Jay. Like when Carnell Tate was banged up and out and Jeremiah Smith was banged up, they had to utilize Max Clare more down the stretch. And what did he do in a couple of those games? He made a lot of plays, right? Like it's not a lack of production because of talent. It was a lack of production because you're sharing the ball with just so many talented players. So I think that context will be considered. And I think that you're going to pop on a couple of those games where he was the featured option and say that 2024 Purdue guy is still there. He was just in a much different situation. So I think there's still fans around the league. I just think that when we're talking about the pecking order of tight ends now, Sadiq's going to go in the first round out of Oregon. And then I think Eli Stowers out of Vanderbilt will probably be the second tight end off the board. After that, it's like, who's tight end 3? Is it Oscar Delp? Is it Max Clare? I still prefer Clare in that conversation. I think some NFL teams will as well.
Ryan and I had so much to talk about. We couldn't fit it all in a normal daily pod. So you have a bonus episode coming your way a little bit later today discussing players like C.J. Donaldson, Caden Curry, and others, as well as looking ahead to the 2027 draft and some Buckeyes that might get drafted a year from now. Thank you for tapping in to Locked On Buckeyes, making this show your first listen of the day. You can follow me on any social media platform at jstevens07. Send every email to jstevens317@gmail.com. This has been Locked On Buckeyes on a Thursday. We'll see you next time.